Can you all hear me clearly? Welcome to this meeting, which is hosted by the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria, as well as Equality Now, the Kenyan chapter, and ICJ, the Kenyan chapter, as well as Equality Now. My name is Susan Mutambasere, and I'm going to be a moderator today. I'm from the Center for Human Rights. I am a project officer with the Women's Rights Unit. And I want to believe that everyone who is here today is very much interested in the work of the African Commission on Women and People's Rights, as well as human rights on the continent. And therefore, this meeting today is a process, part of a process that has been ongoing regarding coming up with a set of guidelines that can be used for civil society organizations and national human rights institutions to draft shadow reports to the African Commission. Therefore, I'm hoping that we'll have a discussion of the draft shadow reporting guidelines that have been so far drafted by the three organizing organizations. They are in draft form, and we would like to reach out to as many civil society organizations as possible within the continent so that we come up with a document that we can all agree with, one that can actually be useful in the drafting of shadow reports. So the actual role of welcoming remarks is not mine. I will be introducing people who are going to do the welcoming remarks. But before we go there, I'm going to let you know that we have a poll that we are going to put up. It should be up on your screens now. We would like you to just take a moment to just respond to the poll, because we just want to know a little bit more about who is in the meeting today and your interest in the meeting that we are having today. Therefore, please just take a moment to just respond to the poll that should be appearing on your screens now. As you do that, I am going to introduce to you today the first speaker, which is Professor Frans Viljoen, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria, who's just going to give us the welcoming remarks to this meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susan. And thank you also to the team at the Center for Human Rights, the Women's Rights Unit, Susan, Patience, and others. And thank you to our collaborating colleagues, Equality Now, and also ICJ Kenya. I think it is wonderful to work collaboratively, and today really takes place in the ambit of collaboration. We would like to very much see everyone included in this call, in this meeting, contribute. As you know, we will do a breakaways into the best that Zoom offers us, and that is to be as inclusive as possible and to tap into the minds and the perspectives that are represented here today. From my side, just a few words about the aim of the meeting, together with my welcome words. I think the guidelines, the draft guidelines themselves also tell us about the aim of these shadow reports. But for me, obviously, at the first level, we are here to look at drafting guidelines for civil society in improving and drafting better and more meaningful shadow reports. But I think the aim at a further level is to make sure that the state reporting process becomes more legitimate, more inclusive, more authoritative, more credible. Our shadow reports should better inform that process. But it's not just the process, it is, for me, ultimately the outcome of that process. And as we all know, what comes out of the state reporting process ultimately are concluding observations. So for me, we should not see our work here today as just, working on shadow reporting guidelines. The guidelines really need to, I think, inform improved concluding observations. Observations in conclusion that are pointed, that are specifically directed, that are not vague, concluding observations that are well informed, that are critical and fair, and really are legitimate and credible. So I think that really is where we're heading, because ultimately, if we have these kinds of concluding
I think we have lost Professor Frans there. Hello, Professor Frans? Okay, so it appears there has been a technical glitch on Professor Frans' side, and we have lost him for the time being. Professor, are you back?
Oh, and I wish us all profitable deliberations. Thank you very much, Susan.
Okay, thank you. I think we had gotten most of what he meant to say this morning. Thank you very much for that. So this process that we have today, as Professor was mentioning, is meant to be as inclusive as possible. And it is a discussion that has taken place among civil society, and it is a discussion also that has started taking place at the Commission itself, as they have adopted a resolution to actually have shadow reporting guidelines drafted. But to just give us an introduction to the whole process that has brought us here today, with the collaboration between the three organizations, I'm going to ask Ms. Judy Gitau, who's the Regional Coordinator for Equality Now, to just give introductory remarks for the meeting that we're going to have today. Ms. Judy, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you, everybody who's participating, distinguished colleagues. It's indeed a pleasure to be here in this webinar today. I'd like first, before speaking about the journey, to acknowledge the partnership and the collaboration, and just to reiterate what Professor Frans has said, the journey and the collaboration that has taken place between ICJ Kenya and the Center for Human Rights Pretoria. Just to say that this journey has been long coming. There's been guidelines or thoughts of development of guidelines, and indeed we are happy that finally the resolution it was passed to sort of legitimize the process that we've been undertaking. Our touchstone with regards to development of technical input with regard to our engagement with the Commission has largely been the Center for Human Rights Pretoria, with ourselves as Equality Now bringing the gender dimension, and with ICJ bringing in the international principles and standards. We began officially with the Center, and the major milestones have included a technical working group meeting that we did have in Kigali, where we brought together civil society organizations representing civil society actors of different categories, those that address different issues across the piece, whether it's specifically human rights, because as you know, these guidelines do not just address shadow reporting by civil society with regards to the Charter, but also with regards to the Maputo Protocol on the rights of women in Africa. And so bringing together different organizations, those that are traditionally national in nature and those that are Pan-African in nature, enriching that process. And so a combination of both the technical and the substantive was put together, and the document therefore was enriched as much as it was, and this is by no means a small feat. And so moving from there to Banjul, where the document was then presented to a broader group of civil society that traditionally engage in that space, in the Banjul space, enabled the document to be representative of the engagement process at the Commission. And so several steps have been taken to date, with the main landmarks speaking to a participatory process, a technical process, and the idea behind it is to not only, as you know, make the engagement with the Commission constructive and ensure that civil society are able to, shall we say, check and input into this process, but critically, the guidelines enable the non-likely allies within civil society to engage with the process. Once there's a guideline, once there are guidelines, and once there's a form through which civil society actors can engage with the process, then we will find that more and more civil society actors, more and more human rights actors, human rights institutions would be able to engage with this process and make it more meaningful and more reach. And so today I can't say more than what
currently unmuted. Alt+A button to active audio settings button menu.
I can't say more than what Prof. Frans has said. Safe to thank the partners that have been aboard this, to thank the civil society actors that have so far input into the process, to thank the technical experts, especially from the center, Dr. Satang being one of them, Patience being one of them, and Prof himself being a part of it. To thank ICJ Kenya, Elsie Saina and her team, and to thank all of us really who have come through this process, and therefore to thank the participants today who will take us to the next level and show us if the guidelines as developed so far provide a useful avenue for those who perhaps haven't before engaged in shadow reporting before the commission, if they're able to engage with the process served by the guidelines. So thank you all, and I guess welcome to the webinar. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Judy, for those remarks. And I'm sure we all appreciate the fact that this process is meant to be as consultative as possible, which is why we are all grateful for the time that you have taken to be here today. And in terms of process going forward, how we're going to conduct this meeting, we are going to have just the setting of the tone for this meeting, where we have a presentation from Patience Mungwari from the Center for Human Rights, who's just going to talk us through the state reporting process and shadow reporting process, just so that we make sure that we are all on the same page regarding shadow reporting and the purpose of these guidelines that we are discussing today. We are then also going to have a presentation from Dr. Satang Nabaneh, who is going to take us through the guidelines themselves, so that we all understand the different sections of the guidelines. And then I think the most important part of this meeting is when we are actually going to go into groups in a breakaway session, where we would like to have your opinions on the guidelines as they stand today, to have your input in terms of the content that is there at the moment, to find out what it is that we can either remove or add. And then we're going to come back into a report back session, where we're going to consolidate the opinions that we would have gotten from the breakaway sessions. So before we go to the first presentation, I think we have, most of the people have voted in the poll. Thiruna, I don't know if we are able to just show the results up on the screen for everyone. But basically, what we wanted to just find out, first of all, is who is in the meeting with us. And from the first question, we find that the biggest group of people that we have today, 43% is from civil society organizations. And then we also have quite a number from academic, 30% of the group. Some are here in their individual capacity, 15%. And we are also glad to see that we have a small number from NHRIs and government departments. The next question was, what is your motivation for attending this webinar? And the biggest percentage of people indicated that they do not understand the shadow reporting process and would like to know more. Therefore, we hope that this meeting will actually help to enlighten you in terms of what it is exactly that we are trying to work on and what the process entails. And then we have the next group of people indicating that they plan to draft shadow reports in the future, which I think is one of the aims really of all of us as society organizations organizing this, is to improve the capacity of society organizations also to be drafting shadow reports, and that will also help the commission to have constructive engagement with state parties in the state reporting process. There is also 25% of the group who are already undertaking shadow reporting in their line of work. And then 30% of the group would also like to understand more about what state reporting is exactly. And then the third question was asking whether any people had actually participated in the drafting of the shadow report before the African Commission before. The majority of the participants today have not participated in the drafting of a state report, which is 80%. And then 13% have participated, and a small number, 7%, have participated, but not necessarily to the African Commission. And then the next question is looking at whether they have ever drafted a shadow report before the African Commission before, and the majority of you have not drafted, which is 73%. And only 18% have actually drafted before the Commission, and 8% of people have drafted, but not necessarily to the African Commission. The final question is looking at whether they had participated, to differentiate it from the previous question where they'd actually drafted, but just participated in the drafting of a shadow report. And again, 73% say they have not. 17% have participated in the drafting of shadow report, and 10% have, but to another body. So I think the first two presenters today, you have your work cut out for yourself. I think we will move right into the first presentation that we are going to have from Ms. Patience Mungwari, who is the program manager for the Women's Rights Unit at the Center for Human Rights, to just take us through what exactly is the state reporting process, as well as shadow reporting. Patience, over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for joining us in this webinar where we are looking at the current draft guidelines on shadow reporting to the African Commission. I don't want to take too much of your time today, because I think we really need to dedicate most of our time at looking at the current draft guidelines in order for us to improve on them, and also to validate them for consideration and adoption by the African Commission. So my role this morning is simply to give you a background by introducing the state reporting obligation and shadow reporting more broadly. So the state reporting obligation is found in Article 62 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and Article 26.1 of the Maputo Protocol, or the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of women in Africa. So if you read Article 62 of the African Charter, it says that each state party shall undertake to submit a report every 2 years from the date the present charter comes into force, a report on the legislative and other measures taken to give with the view of giving effect to the rights and freedom recognized and guaranteed by the present charter. And then if you read Article 26.1 of the Maputo Protocol, it says that state parties shall ensure implementation of this protocol at national level and in their periodic reports submitted in accordance with Article 62 of the African Charter, indicating the legislative and other measures taken for the full realization of the rights herein recognized. So essentially, this means that once a state ratifies the African Charter and the Maputo Protocol, it should submit a report every 2 years detailing how it has implemented the treaty. And the implementation is through a variety of ways, which include legislative, policy, administrative, judicial measures, as well as any other specific programs and awareness raising initiatives that the state party might have taken to ensure the full realization of the rights contained in the two treaties. The African Commission, to assist, in order to assist state parties with this reporting obligation, they have issued a set of guidelines Currently, we have 3 guidelines to assist state parties to report on the African Charter and 1 guideline on the Maputo Protocol. So guidelines on the African Charter include guidelines, general guidelines for national periodic reports. And then we also have what are referred to as the Tunis guidelines. And these are guidelines that help state parties to report on economic and social and cultural rights that are found in the African Charter. And then the final guidelines are guidelines on Articles 21 and 24 of the African Charter, and these relate to extractive industries and the environment. And then we have, as I have mentioned, 1 set of guidelines on reporting under the Maputo Protocol. So if you want to have a look at these guidelines can be accessed on the African Commission website. But the Center for Human Rights also has a virtual platform on state reporting, which can be accessed on www.maputoprotocol.up.ac.za. And on this virtual platform, you'll be able to find not only these guidelines, but also any other information that you might need with regards to state reporting, including information about at what stage of reporting your country is, and the treaties themselves, and also any recent trends and developments with regards to state reporting to the African Commission. So what is the role of civil society in the state reporting process? So since the implementation of treaties is enforced primarily through the state reporting process, it is therefore imperative that civil society that are monitoring implementation of the protocol should understand and use the reporting mechanisms to ensure that they are able to hold their governments accountable. So the guidelines to state reporting issued by the African Commission actually prescribe that civil society organizations must be involved in the drafting of state party reports. And this participation should be at all stages of the drafting process. So it involves consultation of civil society being part of the drafting team, and also civil society participating in the validation of the reports, and where possible, even when the delegation goes to present the report at the African Commission. And also the expectation is that the government should include a broad range of civil society organizations working in the various human rights aspects that are represented in the African Charter and the Maputo Protocol. However, civil society also have a very important role to complement the state reports that are developed and submitted to the African Commission, and this is regardless of the fact that they have participated in the development of the state report or not. So according to the recently adopted 2020 African Commission Rules of Procedure, Rule 79.3 says that institutions, organizations, or any interested party who wishes to contribute to the examination of the state report on human rights of the country in question should send their contributions, including shadow reports, to the Secretariat of the Commission 30 days before the examination of the report. So the rule is saying that if you are interested in the process of the examination of your own country report, or a report of any country that you might have an interest in, then one of the ways in which you can participate is through shadow reporting that report, and this report should be coming to the Commission 30 days before the state party report is examined. So what then is shadow reporting? Shadow reporting is the process of submitting an independent report to a human rights body on the human rights situation of a particular country. Shadow reports play an important role of complementing the information that is provided in the state party reports. So it is not unusual that in conducting the self-assessment of a state party report, that state parties can sometimes minimize some of the problems that they experience in implementing the treaty. And therefore, the inputs of civil society through shadow reports can help to bring out some of the real challenges to the realization of the rights that are guaranteed in the treaty at a national level. Shadow reporting also assists in providing a holistic picture of the human rights situation where a state, excuse me, where a state might have left out some issues or might not be fully aware of some things that are occurring in the country, or even sometimes exaggerate some issues, or in some cases we find that states might lack sufficient resources to provide a very holistic picture of the human rights situation in the country. And so state parties sometimes might struggle with providing things like adequate statistics to support some of the issues that they are raising in their reports. So civil society then play an important role of complementing these state party reports to ensure that the African Commission or the treaty body actually has a more holistic picture of what is happening on the ground. So why are we here today? We are here today because there are no guidelines to shadow reporting. While we have guidelines on state reporting, the African Commission up to today does not have guidelines on shadow reporting. And so civil society organizations have struggled in terms of how to produce relevant shadow reports to the African Commission. And also the African Commission on its end has also been trying to ensure that the reports that they receive from civil society are actually useful for them in giving them the information that they seek to get from the alternative voice of civil society organizations. So when you look at the 2020 rules of procedure of the African Commission, these rules already mention that the shadow reports that are coming to the African Commission should be following the African Commission guidelines on civil society, on shadow reporting, even though there are no guidelines currently, and hence the reason for the work that we have embarked on. However, the African Commission at its 22nd ordinary session on 4 March 2020 adopted Resolution 436. So Resolution 436 recognizes the important role of shadow reporting by independent organizations and the need for shadow reporting guidelines. And it tasks the Special Rapporteur on the rights of human rights defenders and focal point on reprisals in Africa, and the Special Rapporteur on the rights of women in Africa, and the Special Rapporteur on refugees, asylum seekers, independently displaced persons, and migrants in Africa to ensure the development of guidelines on shadow reporting. So in a nutshell, this is what brings us here today. The Center for Human Rights, ICJ Kenya, and Equality Now have embarked on a process of developing these guidelines. And I think Judy has spoken to what has already been done in terms of trying to garner the expert knowledge of civil society actors on the African continent to contribute to the drafting process. And I am very hopeful that today we'll also receive some very good inputs on this current draft as we strengthen it for submission and adoption by the African Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Patience. I think it is very clear from your presentation the role that civil society has to play in the state reporting process. And and also the process that has since happened now in terms of the need to have a set of guidelines in place. And this is a need that has been expressed on both ends, from either the African Commission as well as from civil society themselves. I should have mentioned this before Patience started, but if you have any questions for her, please we write them down in the chat. I currently have one question. You can write further questions in the chat as she answers the first question that I have seen in the chat. We'll have a brief question and answer section before we move on to Satang's presentation. So the question that I have in the chat is asking, what is the need for civil society organizations to present shadow reports since they are already involved in the process of the state report production? So because this is the only question so far, I will ask Patience to respond to it. And while she's responding, if there are any other questions, please put them down in the chat for her to respond.
Thank you, Susan. So yes, civil society is expected to contribute to the state party report drafting process, but sometimes not all civil society are able to take part in the state party report drafting process. So they are also still have an opportunity to give their voice through shadow reports, but also sometimes some of the views that civil society participating in the state party drafting process have might not end up in the state party report itself. And so they also have the opportunity to still share those views in shadow reports. So usually in most countries, as the state report is drafted, the report is drafted with very wide consultation of all stakeholders on the ground. But the report then has to go through approvals by the government, by cabinet, and sometimes some of the issues that might have been raised in the original draft can get lost. And so there's always the need for civil society to give that alternative view that might be lost in the process.
Thank you for that, Patience. I hope your question has been sufficiently answered. I don't see any other questions in the chat. So we will move on to Dr. Satang Nabaneh, who's going to just take us through the draft shadow reporting guidelines. Over to you, Dr. Satang.
Hi, Susan. Thank you. And thank you to everyone. As I join my colleagues to say thank you for taking the time to join us in this validation. This process has been a while, and we're happy that it's moving, especially with the adoption of the resolution and now validating the guidelines and ultimately getting the African Commission to actually adopt the guidelines. So I think my job is easy. I'm not sure. I'm presenting just a quick overview of the draft guidelines as of October of 2019. However, I will also be sharing it on the screen, so you'll actually see that I have also made notes. So what I also do is highlight some certain portions that, you know, in light of Resolution 436 that was adopted by the Commission, just to think in terms of changes, in terms of additions, and so forth. So this is just to especially help in terms of the breakout sessions and some of the issues that can be addressed during those times. I think in the chat there is a link on where you could actually look at or access the draft guidelines. So if you also want to click that link, that'd be great as well, and you can follow with regard to that. Okay, I'll just share my screen. Okay, I hope everybody's seen the document as I share it. But as I said, please look in the chat, there's a link and you can get access to it. So just to say that, and to re-echo what my colleague said, when we were drafting the shadow reporting guidelines. It's really focused on the African Charter and some of its protocols, but specifically as well on the Maputo Protocol. But as I said, we also, in light of Resolution 436, will actually also have to add a little bit in terms of the African Union Convention for the Protection and Assistance of Internally Displaced Persons in Africa, the Kampala Convention, considering the fact that, as Patient rightly said, the task of actually developing the guidelines are placed on the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders, the Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Women in Africa, and the Special Rapporteur on IDPs and so forth. Okay, so in terms of the, so I'll actually just go through the guideline itself. It's not long. The essence of it not being long is to make it easier for national human rights institutions, for individuals and civil society organizations to be able to use these guidelines as a template, as a quick guide in terms of being able to report to the African Commission in terms of state reports on the consideration. So it's actually not a long guideline, which is great. So I'll just go through that. So in terms of the title itself, initially we actually did have the draft guide. It's called, technically it's still draft guidelines. So it was guidelines on shadow reporting on the African Charter, as well as the Maputo Protocol, the full name and so forth. But probably in light of Resolution 436, we will need to look at it as guidelines for shadow reporting to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, which will still have a specific focus on the African Charter and its protocols, including the Kampala Convention, but also specifically on the Maputo Protocol in light of how state reports are, especially in terms of Part A and Part B, which Patient highlighted when she was doing her presentation. Anyway, in terms of the layout of the guidelines, the first part really looks at the introduction, and the introduction is really sets the legal basis for why the shadow report guidelines in essence. And if you follow the Resolution 436, it also just lays out the legal basis for states to report in terms of measures that have taken to ratify international human rights instruments, including the African Charter and its protocols, and the obligation of states to actually submit these reports in accordance with the guidelines of the Commission. So really the introduction looks at Article 62 of the African Charter, which talks about states' obligation to submit state reports. It also highlighted Article 26 of the Maputo Protocol, which also specifically talks about a state report as well. And I highlighted in yellow, and this is an added portion as well, in terms of Article 14 of the Kampala Convention, as highlighted in the resolution that was adopted. The other part in terms of the introduction also is the fact that we also highlighted then, which was last year, Rule 74.2 of the Rules of Procedure, but those were the Rules of Procedure of the Rules of Procedure 2010. Recently, the Rules of Procedure 2020 has been adopted, and in line with state reporting processes, now Rule 84 of the Rules of Procedure 2020 will be applicable. So I just wanted to highlight that, and that will help us, especially in terms of, following the discussion, but also in terms of what changes need to be made to ensure that it is actually in line with what we currently have. And just to say that, and my colleagues have also said it, in terms of this draft shadow report, it's really not for just civil society organizations. It's also for individuals that have expertise in the area or interest in terms of the state on the consideration, but also for national human rights institutions as well. And just the additional portion, I guess a comment in terms of the fact that we also need to recognize Resolution 436 in the introduction, because by the time this was drafted, Resolution 436 wasn't adopted. And then the introduction goes on to actually recognize the role of shadow reports and so forth. So as I said, really the first part really just lays out the legal basis for why the need for a shadow report and which particular provisions in the African Charter as well as its protocols are relevant in terms of this particular shadow report. Then we move on to definitions. So we try to keep it brief and which is really in line with Patient's presentation in terms of what a state report is and what a shadow report is. And we welcome comments on that. But this is just the standard in terms of definition of these two terms. And in the text as well, there are portions where we also did define certain things as well. So probably one of the things we need to think about in terms of after validating these guidelines also is in terms of how we will utilize this in order to make it easier for certain civil, especially for civil society organizations that might not have the technical expertise in terms of having, frequently asked questions and so forth that can address some of the key questions of the shadow report and the definition of state report and so forth. But in the guidelines itself, it's quite brief. These are the two definitions that we have. My colleagues have also, in welcoming everybody and in introducing this meeting, also spoke about the aims and purpose of the shadow report. I don't think I have to really go in depth into this, but basically this section really talks about why the need for a shadow report. So in terms of trying to help us understand why why civil society organizations, why national human rights institutions or individuals should actually do shadow reports when somebody asks, oh yeah, so civil society organizations were part and parcel, for instance, of the process of the state reporting drafting. Why are then they also having the opportunity, for instance, to draft shadow reports? So anyway, the idea is that shadow reports really tries to support the African Commission in getting a more comprehensive picture of the human rights situation in the country under consideration. More importantly as well, and I mean, this is the reality that it also gives civil society organizations the opportunity to actually raise issues that are not in the state party report. If, for instance, there are certain issues missing or there are certain thematic areas that needs more information with regard to giving a more comprehensive picture of what the human rights issues are in that particular country under consideration, this is a great opportunity to actually highlight those particular areas as well. And in a sense, it also does encourage state parties to ensure that they actually provide accurate reports in the future. Because I mean, if a state party presents a particular report that has information that is not factual, and civil society organizations are able to actually provide shadow reports that provide alternative facts that have with backup evidence that shows that probably the state is not very accurate in its report, this might actually prevent other states from doing this. But just to say that the bottom line is the shadow reporting guidelines also, well, the shadow reporting process rather, is not also meant to be adversary, right? It's, you can have a particular civil society organization that has been involved in the state reporting process, doesn't actually exclude that particular CSO, for instance, to actually provide or draft a shadow report to the African Commission. So it's not a fight, it's just to ensure that human rights issues are actually addressed adequately. So that the third part, as I said, really looks at aims and purpose of the shadow report, and we will be grateful if you have comments on that. Then we also look at the fourth part, which really is just a general overview or guidance for preparation of the report. Just key few things that can help in terms of ensuring that the African Commission is able to adequately and easily access the information that you're providing, because at the end of the day, that's what you want. You're providing information that you want the African Commission to use in its consideration of the state report on the that is being reviewed at that particular session, for instance, and so forth. So this general guidelines just really talks about this idea of ensuring that the shadow report is really written in a simple language. It's presented in a very concise way. I mentioned this before, but that the report also is very factual, especially in terms of, we do know that in a lot of our countries, like civil society organizations and national human rights institutions, for instance, are best placed in terms of being able to provide, for instance, disaggregated data and so forth. So these are really things and things that can be used in terms of sources and so forth. So in terms of ensuring that the shadow report is really factual and reliable, it also needs to go alongside with a body of evidence, which can include court cases, official reports, academic research, NGO reports, news articles, and so forth, and just to ensure that you actually do cite it as well. We also recommend that, if you have copies of the relevant provision of the law or the court judgment, you can also attach it as annex, which might be helpful for the commission. In terms of language, the report should be drafted in at least one of the official languages of the African Union, and we know it's either English, French, Portuguese, Arabic, and so forth. So at least in one of the official languages. We also noted that reports should be submitted at least 60 days prior to the examination of the report. I think one of the ongoing conversation around this particular portion, since we started drafting this shadow reporting guidelines rather, is that in terms of accessibility to state party reports readily available on the African Commission website is usually very late. Like, for instance, if a particular country is supposed to be considered, their reports are usually not on the Commission website quite early, so that civil society organizations or whoever wants to do a shadow report is able to access the state report. However, with the adoption of the new rules of procedures and other measures that have been put in place at the African Commission, we're hoping that this might make things easier. And also, we also noted that in terms of the report itself, it needs to take into account, for instance, concluding observations by the Commission. Professor Frans did actually talk about how, for instance, the shadow reports can feed into the concluding observations that will eventually be issued by the Commission. But in a sense, also in terms of the shadow reporting itself, you could also highlight in terms of gaps and areas of measures that states have taken with regard to concluding observations that were already issued by the African Commission relating to the previous report. Other things include general comments, findings on communications against a specific state, as well as taking into account other mechanisms as well. Okay, then in terms of the format and the content of the shadow report, that's divided into two. So in terms of the format, this is just also very much general information in terms of how the report should look like, for instance. So a cover page, ideally, that identifies the organizations that are actually organizations or individuals that are submitting the report. And just to say that it's good that we actually said submitting organizations, because this is also to highlight that in certain cases you can have a single NGO submitting a shadow report. In other cases as well, you can have a consortium of different organizations coming together, whether in the same thematic area or different thematic areas, and coming up with one single shadow report. So it also just depends on how much collaborative effort is there, for instance, in terms of the shadow reports, and what will make it more useful in terms of what you present to the African Commission. Other things that needs to be in the shadow report: a table of contents so that the report is user-friendly, an executive summary, a one-page executive summary in bullet point at the beginning of the document. This is important because it's an opportunity just for the Commission, for instance, to look at, you know, the main points of the report, the evidence that is included, what the proposed questions and recommendations are in terms of government action that the Commission can actually use during its deliberation. And this is important. We all know, especially if you do engage with the African Commission mechanism, we do know that they're busy. We do know that they have quite a lot in terms of their mandate. So it's also good that this executive summary is very succinct and very comprehensive in a sense. It's short but comprehensive, that really gives, you know, the main points in terms of the shadow report that you're submitting. You also have introduction, but please, we also mentioned in this portion that it needs to be in such a way that it doesn't repeat what is already in the state party report, because I mean, the essence of the shadow report is not to repeat what is in the state report, but to see whether there might be areas and gaps in the state report that is presented in the shadow report. In terms of the structure of each issue, you identify the issue, indicate, especially in terms of, if you look at state reports, in most cases, you actually see that they're either in paragraphs, for instance, or in numbers. So it's also good that reference is made to these to make it easier. And these are just, as I said, in terms of the format, just in terms of making it easier for the African Commission to access the information that you're trying to share. Okay, so this is the crux, the content in terms of the layout of the shadow report itself. This is the crux of the guidelines. So in terms of content, the draft shadow report guidelines, as you see, and if you're also looking at it, in terms of content, really looks at it in two parts. One, it looks at the status of general implementation of the African Charter and the Maputo Protocol. I'll be saying the African Charter and the Maputo Protocol. As I said, even though in this instance, if you actually read the draft guidelines, you will also see that it's the African Charter and its protocols, in particular the Maputo Protocol, but also, as I said, we will also need to keep in line the Kampala Convention, considering Resolution 436. Anyway, in terms of the first part of the content, the draft shadow guidelines, reporting guidelines, focuses on the status of general implementation of the African Charter, its protocols, and the Maputo Protocol. So as it really tries to, in terms of this, to really look, I'm trying not to read everything. As I said, you know, the whole point is just for me to tease out some of the main things that probably needs to be addressed in the breakout sessions, and we can come back to that. So in terms of doing the status of the general implementation, certain things can be looked at. One is identifying the gaps in terms of implementation. Second is identifying the impediments to the realization of the provisions in the Charter and its protocol. And we went down to actually highlight in terms of identifying the main issue or challenges, to provide concise recommendations, as well as ensure that rule parties are clearly outlined to ensure implementation of the recommendations. It's also important that in that status of general implementation of the Charter and the protocol, civil society organizations, for instance, in their shadow report can also identify and address reservations, and we try to define what reservations are. If a particular state party has a reservation on the Maputo Protocol or one of the provisions of the African Charter, it's actually good to highlight that. But also importantly, also in terms of suggested questions relating to the specific issues that you address. So in terms of the second part, it focuses on reporting on the specific principles or the substantive provisions of the African Charter, its protocols, particularly the Maputo Protocol. And in this part, we do, in terms of the draft guidelines, we actually follow the state reporting guidelines as well. We do know that for state reports, for instance, for those states that have actually ratified the Maputo Protocol, usually the state report has a part A which focuses on the substantive provisions of the African Charter, and there is Part B, which focuses on the substantive provisions of the Maputo Protocol. So in terms of reporting on the specific provisions for the shadow report, we also thought it's important. So for instance, if you're dealing with any article that has to do with the African Charter, for instance, you can have a Part A that relates to the African Charter and its protocols. And in this case, it will include the Kampala Convention, for instance. But in other cases, if, for instance, your specific focus is a particular article in the Maputo Protocol, you can have that as well. So in terms of Part A, some of the things relating to the African Charter, you can report on legislative and other practical measures. You can report whether these measures are actually implemented and to what extent. You can also provide examples of developments made in respect of the right of the right in question, backed by evidence if possible. You can also indicate how best the state can actually address violations of the rights in question and provide questions to, propose questions to the African Commission as well relating to that particular right. And just to say, as I said, that the report depends. It depends on whether, for instance, as I said, you have a consortium of different civil society organizations coming together and addressing a particular specific thematic area, say for instance, like sexual and reproductive health and rights, or whether the consortium is looking at, you know, a lot of articles and so forth. But as I said, the shadow report needs to be very, whilst it needs to be comprehensive, it also needs to be concise. So it also wouldn't make a lot of sense to have a very long shadow report as well in terms of addressing some of the rights under consideration. So Part B, which focuses on the Maputo Protocol, also talks, it's quite similar, and this really follows also the state reporting guidelines that we have on the Maputo Protocol in terms of the various measures that the state party has taken relating to the rights that are provided in the Maputo Protocol, whether they're legislative or administrative measures, whether they're existing bad laws, and also in, as mentioned just now, in terms of the shadow report, also suggesting questions to the Commission, as well as also in terms of following the thematic layout of what is in the state reporting guidelines on the Maputo Protocol. So this really, Part B, really tries to follow that particular guideline. So as I said, you can have civil society organizations or national human rights institutions can really focus on one particular area, for instance, in the Maputo Protocol in terms of the thematic area, or they can focus on particular articles. So basically that's the crux of the guidelines. Just apologies if I really went through it quickly, but as I said, we really thought the breakout sessions will be useful in terms of getting more input relating to how the shadow report should specifically be. We also have a section on practical suggestions, and this is just in terms of making life easier for everybody, including the people or the individuals or the organizations submitting the report, but also to the Commission generally, where in the draft guidelines, we're suggesting that if, for instance, a shadow report looks at both the African Charter as well as the Maputo Protocol, for instance, it should not exceed 10 pages. But if it is just specifically on, say, a specific thematic area on the African Charter or the Maputo Protocol, you know, it can be like 5 pages. You know, as we mentioned, you can also add additional documentation as annex for reference as well. And we also stated suggestions around formatting and style guidelines as well. In terms of the shadow report as well, to make life easier for everybody and for ease of reference, also paragraphs and pages should be numbered. They must also be saved and submitted as Word document only. as I said, and I think I have been trying to echo this throughout the presentation, that, you know, there is no issue with regard to a single organization submitting a shadow report. However, due to ensuring or encouraging collaboration among civil society organizations, a joint report between, say, like 5 different organizations working in the same thematic area is also very much encouraged in terms of maximum impact, because then you will have several of these organizations being able to contribute towards the data that is needed and the issues that needs to be raised. And lastly, we also have the miscellaneous provisions, which talks about the adoption and entering into force, as well as the amendment and the title or the citation of the guidelines itself. So specifically, as I said, the guidelines are quite short, it's quite brief in terms of how you know, civil society organizations and national human rights institutions can take this after it has eventually been adopted by the African Commission. You know, can be frequently asked questions, can be you know, brochures that are quite succinct in terms of supporting the process. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take that before we move into the breakout sessions. Thank you. Susan?
Thank you very much, Satang, for your presentation. And I hope that the content of the guidelines are a bit more clearer to everyone. There are a number of questions that are in the chat. I encourage, if you have a question, to put it in the chat, but I believe some of them came a bit earlier and they were answered in the course of your presentation. But I do have some questions that I think maybe you can address. There's a question here that is asking whether shadow reporting can pose challenges where there's a conflict of interest with state actors. That's question 1. And then there's another question that came from Facebook, which is asking whether you know, it's the guidelines mention individuals that may submit shadow reports. And the question is, why is it established that they have relevant expertise? That's the second question. And then I'll give you a third question. You can answer those 3, and then we'll see if we can take up some more. The third question is, do state reports have any credibility where the Commission lacks fund to send the Commission on inquiry to visit the states and verify what has been reported? How reliable is shadow reporting, especially in states that are heavily militarized?
Okay, so that's a lot of questions. So, I mean, some of the questions any of my colleagues can answer anyway. Okay, what was it? I have lost.
So the first question was asking the issue of conflict of interest between civil society organizations and
right.
State actors. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mentioned this during the presentation. This idea that you could actually, because for instance, one of the good practices for the state reporting process. When a state party is actually drafting its state report to the African Commission, to include a variety or a wide range of actors, including, in most cases, civil society organizations and national human rights institutions. And just to say that the reality is that in a lot of our countries as well, in terms of some of the work relating to the attainment or the realization of certain rights, civil society organizations tend to do quite a lot of that, and so do have a lot of data in terms of that. And these are usually, in most cases, actually highlighted in the state report, and states in their state party report also do highlight at the, I think, especially at the beginning, in terms of who was involved in the drafting process. But as I said, just that an organization have been involved in the drafting process or support the drafting process of a state party doesn't necessarily mean that that particular civil society organization cannot or should not submit a shadow report. especially if they have more information regarding the situation, because ultimately the state party report is written by government, it's owned by government. So if in any case, the civil society organizations that have participated in the state reporting, state party drafting process are interested in providing or drafting a shadow report, they can do so. As I said, a shadow report should not be seen as a civil society versus the state. That's really not the essence of the shadow reports. The shadow reports are really intended, as I said from the beginning, in terms of the aims and purpose, to give a more comprehensive view of the human rights situation as well as the issues that needs to be addressed. And patients, be happy. I'm happy for you to come in and jump in anytime if you want to add on any of the on any of the comments that I have with regard to the questions. Okay, Suzanne, the next question.
The other question was asking why relevant expertise, why that term for individuals that can do a shadow report?
Okay, so I think just to say that the relevant expertise doesn't have to do with the shadow report itself. The relevant expertise was with regard to the specific information that you're given, for instance. So for instance, if you're an individual from an academic institution, for instance, that does quite a lot of research on the rights of women to land, for instance, you have particular expertise in that particular area, or you're an activist, probably not wanting to be attached to a particular organization or so forth, but you have grassroots experience or you have national experience in terms of that specific issue. So it's relevant expertise in terms of the particular areas that you're trying to do a shadow report on, not necessarily that you have experience with regard to shadow reporting. Whether you've done a shadow report before or not doesn't exclude you, or there's nothing to prevent you from actually doing a shadow report. And that is the whole essence of having these guidelines, that if somebody that has never done a shadow report before wants to do or submit a shadow report to the African Commission, what are they supposed to do? And this is supposed to serve as I said, a quick guide as to say, this is what you're supposed to do, A, B, and C, and you're able to do that easily as well in terms of having the capacity to do so. Yeah.
The other question that I had read out, I think, is to do with really the credibility of the reporting process, the state reporting process itself, where maybe a state can just send through a report, but there's no verification because the commission does not actually send a commission of inquiry to a particular state. So I think then the second part of that question is then referring to how perhaps the ease of writing a shadow report in a hostile environment, which the question is put as heavily militarized.
Right.
So,
okay.
If you want to try.
So I think the first part is I think that's going back to patient's presentation in terms of what the process looks like, right? When the state party submits its state report to the commission, it's ultimately put on the website for people to access and so forth. At no point is there any mandate or necessity, for instance, for the commission to actually go into a particular state party to actually verify whether, to do an investigation or so forth. So and this really takes us back to the essence of why we need shadow reports, right? Because when the state submits the report and during a particular session that it comes and presents, so you have state representatives, representing mostly mostly the Ministry of Justice, for instance, as well as other relevant ministries and so forth, will come and present to the commission, whilst everybody's sitting, including civil society organizations or civil society organizations and national human rights institutions that are participating in that session will watch and so forth. That also provides a platform for the commission to actually directly ask questions to the states during that process. So in terms of the relevance of having shadow reports is that these shadow reports can also be used as the investigative outcome, for instance, in terms of verifying whether the state is actually giving the whole picture. So what you have in the shadow report could actually be used by the commissioners to ask questions, to ask relevant questions, to raise relevant issues. Because as I said, the whole point of one of the key things that needs to come out of the shadow report is that your shadow report also needs to be factual. So you're not writing the shadow report out of the blue. And that was why you know, I spoke about this idea about ensuring that you have evidence that really backs up the sort of information that you're giving, whether, and then if you have copies, for instance, if you have copies of these, including NGO reports and court judgments and so forth, you can actually add it as annex just in case. But the shadow report really is useful in terms of trying to identify gaps in the state report that is under consideration. So the commission can actually use what is in your shadow report to ask questions to the states relating to that, and that is where you know, the usefulness of the shadow report also comes in. But I think generally also in terms of, we do know that in certain African countries as well, reprisals is a problem in terms of information that you can actually provide, if it is contrary to the state, for instance. And I think recently we've been talking about the rules of procedures that were adopted earlier in 2020, and it talks about this issue about protection of, for instance, civil society organizations and other actors that work with the African Commission from reprisals from their states. Generally, that if you provide information to the commission, for instance, your state should not reprise you and so forth. But I think the alternative to that also is in terms of going back to this collaboration and doing joint submission, for instance. What we've actually done, for instance, at the center, for instance, we've actually submitted shadow reports in countries that might not be deemed easily the easiest countries to actually submit shadow reports for, organizations that are actually based in those particular countries. So yes, and I think I didn't mention this, but the point is, you also don't have to, as a civil society organization, you also don't have to just submit a shadow report. For instance, if you're from country A, to submit a shadow report on country A. If, for instance, you are an organization that has regional outreach and so forth, and works with quite a lot of countries as well, or has collaboration or collaborates with other organizations in other countries, you can also submit shadow reports on those particular countries. So you don't have to be a citizen of that particular country to be able to submit a shadow report. So this is one area probably where, for instance, if an organization or individual, for instance, feels like they might not be safe if they submit a shadow report, you can actually collaborate with organizations outside that particular country who can submit the shadow report, like a joint submission and so forth, and probably not include and anonymize your information regarding that particular report. But if patient has something to add, you're welcome to do so.
Thank you, Satang. Just to add to a few of the questions, the first one that I want to speak to is the credibility of state party reports. Just to say that when state parties are submitting reports to the commission, they are supposed to provide means of verification for the claims that they make in the reports. So just like you write, when you write a report, you have to reference your sources. State parties also need to provide references. They need to support their assertions with case law, as an example, and attach copies of the case law to the report itself. And so those are some of the ways in which the Commission tries to ensure that the reports that are coming from state parties are actually credible. But also from the Commission's side, each country has a country rapporteur. One of the commissioners is a rapporteur for the country. And the idea is that the rapporteur ideally should have an intimate knowledge of the country that they are rapporteuring. And so the reason why also state parties are encouraged to submit their reports early to the Commission way in advance of the session that they are going to be reviewed is to allow the country rapporteur, to allow the legal assistance, to allow the special rapporteur on the rights of women and the other commissioners to actually analyze the report, verify the information that is coming out of the report. And then the shadow reports come in to help them, at least point them to potential areas where the state party might not have told the truth. But also the Commission outside of the state reporting mechanism also does promotional visits to countries. They go into countries to promote the mandate of the Commission, but they also go into countries to assess the human rights situation of countries. And when they do that, they also develop reports around the human rights situation in a particular country. And this information then becomes some of the bases in which they view these reports. But also, I don't think it is also in the interest of the state party to be labeled as a state party that has lied to the Commission by producing a report that is, very uncredible. So state parties also are very conscious, and they do take the state reporting mandate seriously to a certain extent. And then, of course, the issue around writing shadow reports in countries that are quite repressive. I think Satang has already mentioned the fact that sometimes international NGOs or NGOs working outside a particular country can still write shadow reports with the assistance of civil society working at a national level. But also just to say that the shadow report itself, unlike the state report, is not a public document. So you will not see your shadow report on the website of the Commission, for example. Neither will the Commission say that we received shadow reports from the Center for Human Rights, ICJ Kenya, and Equality Now. You will not be, the reports would not be made public. They are for the sole use of the Commission to assess the human rights situation in the country. So they shouldn't be fear that the Commission will make known the fact that you have written a shadow report to the Commission. I think those are the two things that I thought I could also add my voice to.
Thank you so much, Patience. I'm conscious of the time. There are a number of comments and questions that I find on the chat at the moment, but can I ask you if you can actually incorporate those into the group reports that we're going to have after the group sessions, so that we actually have enough time for us to look at the shadow reporting guidelines themselves. There are also some comments and questions that are coming from Facebook, which we will also incorporate when we have the final discussion after people have gotten into their groups. I hope you allow me to do that, because I realize that we have gone beyond the time that we had put on the program, and I would like us to have adequate time to at least look at the guidelines. The guidelines themselves are not very long, and we are going to divide the group into smaller groups so that we can have more productive conversations. But also, each group is actually going to discuss a small section of the reporting guidelines. So I'm going to see if we can do that in 30 minutes or less. I'm going to have from the communications, we have Tiruna, who's with us, who's going to assign people randomly into groups. So because there are almost about 80 of us in the meeting, I think our conversations might be more productive if they are between 8 to 10 people per group. So we are going to divide the guidelines into about 4 or 5 sections. So some groups we will have 2 groups discussing the same issue. But of course, because we are diverse people, we hope that that's also going to bring back different opinions into the group. As you go into the groups, I'm also going to request that you nominate a person who's going to be your rapporteur, who's going to report back in the session when we come back, to just record the conversations that are going to take place in the groups. So once you are assigned to your groups, a message is going to come through, which will just indicate to you which section of the guidelines you are going to be discussing. Tiruna, could you please go ahead and do the groups?
Okay, all the groups have been created, and the people who haven't been assigned to groups are our co-hosts. So that's all the people on the panel, including Judy and Jeffrey.
Tiruna, are we still having a group remaining in the main meeting room?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Tiruna, I had been assigned to breakaway room 5, but I think I'm back in the main session somehow.
Yes, I assigned all the panelists as a co-host.
Okay, so I can go back.
So you can enter a group, or you can stay in the main room.
Okay, I think I had been put in group 5. Let me join them again.
Who's remaining in the main meeting room?
It should be yourself, Susan, Satang.
Because it's asking me to join breakout room 6.
Okay.
Taruna?
Yes.
So I see there are people still in the main room, about quite a number.
I've been assigning the ones that were not assigned yet.
Oh, okay. So you're still assigning.
Yes. So there were about 5 people who weren't assigned yet. I think there are a few people who are not connected. So it's taking a few minutes for them to join. But in the main room at the moment, there's still quite a few people, but I'm currently assigning them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tiruna?
Yes, Susan?
The message you sent with for what the groups are discussing, did it send on chat to all the groups?
It on my side it indicates that it's sent, but I can't see them in the group.
Because I saw them when they popped up, but then the people who are in the groups, like Satang said, they didn't get
Any of
the
the
message that
messages.
indicates.
Okay, I'm going to try sending it here. So I think they pop up and then they don't stay up.
Okay.
Should I resend the messages again?
I think so, because I think the groups are not sure which section they're supposed to be.
Okay. I'm just going to send it again. So it was quite a short message that you can send. So I had to send each one by one.
Okay, so I can see it in the main. And Satang is saying in group 7, there are only 3 people.
On my side, it shows that there's about 8 people, but it shows that some of them haven't joined. So they've been assigned, but they haven't clicked the accept to enter the room. Okay.
Okay,
Hello?
so maybe if anyone is still in the main meeting room and you have received the message to join, kindly accept and join the room that you have been assigned to. There's going to be another group that is going to remain in the main meeting room. So we're just waiting for people to go to their assigned groups, and then the group that remains will also have a discussion.
Okay, hi Susan. Have
Hi.
you figured how it's working?
Sorry?
Have you figured how it's working? I didn't hear what you had just said.
I was trying to explain to people who are still in the main meeting room that
Okay.
if they have received a message to join a group, they should click accept so that they join the room. There's one person who's saying they were assigned to group 6, but I think they might have been booted out. And so I'm not sure if I can pronounce the name correctly. Chemur, Chemurgor. I think they're trying to get back to group 6. And then another one is trying to go back to room 2, S. Priscilla Yago.
Okay, I'm going to just see on my side what it says. So it says that Priscilla is from room 2, but she hasn't joined it yet. So the notification might be on her screen, but I've been sending the tasks for each group to them.
Okay.
And apparently it pops up as a banner.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So Priscilla says she had been in group 2, but she came back into the main group. So because the instruction had not reached group 2, so she needs to go back into group 2. I don't know if you're able to send her back.
Okay, let me see. I think I can leave. I can remove her and re-add her to the same room.
Okay. Am I still co-host? Can I help at all?
Yes, yes. You are still the co-host. So okay, so it should allow her to enter room 2 now. Okay, I can see her in room 2.
Okay, and then the other one is trying to get back to room 6. I'm not sure. Like I said, I don't know. It says Chemu. The name that says Chemu Rgor. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but they're trying to get back to group 6.
So they're in group 6. Okay, let me see if I can find them. Yes, okay, I see. So they didn't accept the joining. So I'm just going to send them back.
And then there's someone who came late who would like to be assigned Gashal Tamer. Yes.
Okay, I think I've just assigned Gashal. So I do see there are a few people who were assigned but still haven't joined yet. And I think on my side, I see that I'm able to join some of the rooms. So I think I'm going to pop into them. I'm not sure if you're able to. Do you see the breakout rooms on your screen?
I see it, but it says I've been assigned to room 6. That's all it says.
So what I think would work best is if I go to the different rooms and then you stay in the main room, because we're still broadcasting to Facebook. So
Okay.
there needs to be a video for people to tune into.
Okay. So maybe if you can move to each group, then you can
just check if they're working on the correct thing.
Explain where their challenges. So in the main group, in the main meeting room, are there people here, or are these people who have logged in but have left the meeting? Is there anyone?
Hello.
Can you guys respond if you're there?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, I can hear you.
Okay, my name is Nima. I've just been allocated to room 3, meeting room 3, but we've been here for quite a while, but there is no moderator or anybody. So I just got out of there to get to you guys, so that we let you know.
Okay. So
yeah, meeting room 3.
Okay. So we had explained
Yeah.
that when you did you get though the section that you're supposed to
No,
look at?
we don't even know what we're supposed to do. We're just there, but we don't know what we're supposed to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So group 3, you are supposed to look at the general guidance and the format section. And you are supposed to, amongst yourselves, choose a person who's going to report back into the main meeting. So you have a discussion, and then you have one person who's going to report back into the main meeting. You choose amongst yourselves.
Can we have that written to the group, or can somebody just get in there and maybe explain to us so we can?
Okay, Tiruna is on her way.
Right, okay.
Okay, she's coming around.
Okay.
You said,
Right.
What is your name appearing as? Because I think she needs to send that.
Nima's iPhone. It says Nima's iPhone.
Okay. So maybe Tiruna needs to send you back to your group 3.
Yes, please. Yeah, because we are there and it's like we don't know what to do.
Wow.
Sorry. Hello. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
I can hear you.
Right. How do I go back to the meeting again?
Okay, Tiruna is still there.
Okay.
I'm trying to get her to. Okay, so I think she's moving around. Let me see if I can. Because I'm unable to put you in a group myself.
Right. Okay.
But maybe, you know, the people that are in here in the main meeting room, they did you receive a notification on which group? I think this might be group 6, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I received the notification. I was invited to join room 3, which I did, but we were there for a couple of minutes or so, and nothing was happening. This is why I came back to let you guys know, but I didn't know how to get back there again.
Okay, so the host, I think, is the only only one who can send you back. But I think, let me check if she's gone to room 3, group 3, because I think there's also someone who's asking. Tiruna, is group 3 sorted now?
Hi, Susan. I just spoke to group 8. I'm now moving to group 7. I'm going to group 3 next. Or should I go to them first?
Because if, okay, all right, you can go to them first because you need to put Nima back into group 3 and then maybe go there because I think Nima and also Ambe, Kingsley, put them back into group 3 and then go there first.
Okay, let me do that.
Which group, sorry, before you go, which group is this one? The main room?
It's just the main room.
Okay, so the people who are here are not having a discussion. Are there people here actually who are not?
Yes, it looks like there's about 20 people here.
Yeah, but I keep asking for someone to say something. There is no one responding, so.
So I've moved
You have put back Nima.
Group 3, and I've moved Yima to group 3 as well. So I'm not sure if they've joined yet. It doesn't show that they've joined, but I'm going to enter the room to speak to the group now.
Okay. Okay, so you can actually put on your mics if you're in the main room and speak. I see there's a question from Gerald. Because the main room people, everyone had been moved to the other groups. I'm not sure about the people that have remained here, but we can also have a discussion here. And you can actually put on your mic and have a conversation. We can look at maybe the general guidance and the format of the guidelines and have a discussion about that. Are there, apart from Gerald, is there anyone else? I see there's someone who's waiting to go back to group 6. I will ask Thiruna to just do that because I'm unable to move you back. But if there is anyone who's actually in the room from the people that I see on the participants list, maybe we can also have a discussion on the general guidelines, general guidance. Tiruna? Kingsley, are you still here? Has Tiruna sorted out group 3?
Hi, Susan, I'm back now. So there was someone who was not assigned.
There's someone who's trying to go back to group 6.
Okay. I think I'm going to take them out of the group and then reassign them. It's the person whose name you had just sent me.
Yes. And is group 3 sorted now?
Yes, they are. I just spoke to them.
Okay.
And group 5 is fine. I'm just going to check on the other ones. Group 1 is fine. Yolanda is with them. Jeffrey is in group 8. So I just need to check on 7 and 2.
Okay.
Okay.
Gerald, are you speaking? I did say, Gerald, I don't know if you had stepped out, but I had said that I'm not sure if anyone else apart from you is actually in this room, in the main room. And I had indicated that we can talk about the general guidance and the format, but I don't hear anyone else speaking up. I asked people to mute their mics to actually have a conversation, but I then actually thought that there are people who have logged in and have left the meeting because no one is responding. You can actually unmute yourself and we can have a conversation, but no one has has spoken up. So I actually thought there was no one in the room.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yes.
But I see there are about 12 of us in this group.
I'm sorry about that. Yes, there are people in here, but I'm also thinking there might be people who have logged in and have actually left because no one else is responding when I speak.
Okay, I see.
Yes. So I don't know, unless if you actually just, we can have a conversation if you have an opinion on the contents of under the general guidance and the format of the guidelines.
You are saying the opinions on what? Opinion
on the section that says general guidance and the format.
General
You
guidance.
Yes.
Let me just look at the format. The format, huh?
Yes, it says, starting from where it says, let me see if I can just open the document.
Actually, Article 14 is that.
Sorry?
Article 14, is that the one?
Yeah. Hold on.
Cover page, is that the one? Executive summary, introduction.
Yes, I think
I'm
so.
looking at it wrong. No, I just wanted to clarify. Last time, how many pages was it? Was it 30? Or what was the number of pages that we were supposed to? In terms
the
of
pages for the shadow report.
Yeah. Was it 30? Was it still 30?
So I don't think because we did not have any set of guidelines. It was open-ended, but this set of guidelines is suggesting that the report be as concise and short as possible. So we are looking at maybe a total of 10 pages on the substantive issues.
10 pages, yeah.
On part 10 pages on part A and part B, because the problem that happens usually is that when the report is too long, the commission will not have the time to actually go through all of it. So to make it as concise as possible, the guidelines are suggesting that if they can be kept up to about 10 pages, and then any evidence that you have, if there are cases, if there's legislation, can be put as annexes to the report, but the substantive part of it only be just 10 pages.
Okay, all right. So okay. Now I was mixing up issues. I think I was thinking about the other report, but if it's 10, I think it's okay. And in terms of the structure of the report, I think that was mainly the main concern. I think in the past reports we have seen that usually shadow reports are written after the government has published reports, but you find like governments take time to submit reports, and normally they are not even shared with non-state actors. So at times it's very difficult to then respond to the substantive issues as they arise, particularly when they are raised by the state party. So for me, that's the main observation that I've noticed. But so, like I said, they are not really, the reports are not shared widely, and usually it takes time to have access to them and also prepare the report. And considering that the time given is very short to submit a report.
Okay, so one of the changes that we will actually be making to the guidelines is that the new rules of procedure, because the old rules indicated that any contributions to the state report in terms of a shadow report have to be in at least 60 days before the consideration of the report. But the 2020 rules of procedure for the commission have now cut that time to 30 days. So we hope that will at least assist in terms of, because the commission itself will put up the report on their website when a state is coming up for consideration. So the state report will be on the website of the commission. When exactly is not something that I can say at this point, but I think the reduction in the period to 30 days might actually assist in terms of allowing civil society organizations to at least have access to the state report before the 30 days has expired.
No, that's positive. I think those changes are essential. But my concern was around the access to that report, because even if you may give in time, but you find the state party or the
you can access it once it has been sent to the commission. You can, if it has been accepted for consideration, you can find it on the website of the African Commission if the country is coming up for consideration. So you'll find that at any given session, you'll have maybe 2-3 countries that are coming up for consideration. So of course, it is expected that the state party in drafting the report have consulted civil society, but if they have not, then the report can then be found on the website of the commission prior to the next session that will be coming.
Hi, Susan, I'm back. Most of the rooms are fine. It was just room 4 that seemed to not have any individuals participating. So I reassigned the people from room 4 to other rooms. So we'll have 7 groups reporting back. I just wanted to know how much time is left so I can send the groups a message.
I actually wanted to find out from you when you were going around whether the discussions are still ongoing, and perhaps maybe if you just give them 5 more minutes to wrap up conversations and then they can come back for the report. From what I hear from some of the facilitators, some of them have not, there's not a lot of discussion going on anymore.
Yeah.
So if there's still some groups that are still discussing, maybe just give them 5 minutes to wrap up and then they come back for the report back.
Okay, so I think I can just send a message saying that they have 5 minutes left, because the groups I had checked into, they were all in the middle of discussions and they said they would like some more time.
Oh, okay. All right. So it's just that I was a bit worried because we had some technical difficulties, and I think the actual time that people had to discuss was not as long as we intended. But if perhaps maybe in another 5 minutes, if people are able to wrap up discussions, maybe we can come back, I think.
Okay. Okay. And has there been discussion going on in this main room?
So there's only one person who I was in a conversation with. I think the other people might be just logged on, but not actually in the room. So because no one else responded to my questions, so I think maybe only one person was in.
Okay. So I've just sent the broadcast message now. And yeah, we'll see if there are any more support requests. But I think maybe we can use this opportunity to discuss some of the questions that had been posed from Facebook. I'm not sure if you feel comfortable maybe just discussing 1 or 2 of the questions yourself, or would you prefer that we speak to one of the panelists?
So we will, because that's what I also intended, that when we come back, you mean when we come back, right, into the session?
I think when we come back, we can get the reports back, and then Jeffrey had indicated that he'll be stepping in for Joanna.
Okay, to do the discussion.
So,
that's fine. So you mean discussing the question on Facebook here while we wait for the...
Yeah, right now while we wait.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll just be talking to the people on Facebook then. Let me see if I can, if there are questions that I can...
I'll check if there's any new questions that might have been posed. Barry had asked 27 minutes ago, have we ever had a shadow report by national human rights institutions?
Okay. I'm not sure I can answer that off the top of my head, but I can confirm in a minute. I think there was another question that I had seen from Facebook. It says, is it possible that the shadow reports is based only on a particular issue or some, or should it necessarily develop all the parts that you have mentioned, part A or part B? So I think maybe just to respond to that question, it is possible. There are two ways in which a shadow report can be done. It can either be a general shadow report, which is responding to the entire state report, where it looks at the provisions that have been reported in the state reports, provision by provision, and commenting on them. That is a general shadow report. So it will actually then look at Part A, the African Charter, and what the state has reported and comment on it, and then Part B as well on the Maputo Protocol. But the other option for doing a shadow report is a thematic one, where, for example, if it's an organization that has an interest in a particular area, let's say, for example, freedom of expression, which is under the African Charter, it is entirely possible for a shadow report to only focus on that section and provide information regarding that particular thematic area. Similarly, if it is an organization that is interested in, say, women's rights and wants to comment on the part B of the state report, they can also do a thematic report, which is focused either on the entire part B or even just a section of part B. Say if you want to look at the rights, because if you look at the guidelines that the state reporting guidelines for the Maputo Protocol, they are put into 8 thematic areas. So you can say choose the rights of specially protected women or the rights relating to marriage. If that is your area of interest and you want to report particularly on that, you can also proceed to do your shadow report on that without necessarily reporting on the entire report. But the guidelines assist even for that thematic report that you're going to do in terms of what you can put in there, the content of that report. Let me see if there's another question from Facebook. Someone from Facebook asked when we should expect the final version of these guidelines. So I think we explained in the introduction that this is a process that is ongoing, which is meant to be as consultative as possible. And there are organizations that have participated to this date to the drafting of these guidelines. We have also organizations that are represented here today who are giving their input on the drafting guidelines. And we are also hoping that we try as much as possible to ensure that we have reached out to the as many organizations as we can on the continent, so that the process is inclusive as possible. So at this point, the final version of the guidelines, I'm unable to tell you exactly when the final version, because after this meeting, we're going to now incorporate the comments that have come in. And then if there are still additional comments that are coming into the draft, then we incorporate those as well, so that we ensure that the process is as inclusive as possible. But we are really hoping that they will then be presented to the African Commission for possible adoption. Then let me see if there's another one I can attempt to answer. I see a hand up from Alana, who's in the group. I don't know if you want to say something.
I was trying to say something earlier.
Okay.
A couple of things. One, it does seem great that, you know, the idea of having sort of a page limit in theory is great. And you say 10 pages, but if, for example, you look at the UPR where that's the case, it does get difficult sometimes if you're working on a border rights. If you're doing a report on economic social rights, just being able to capture that in 10 pages and also give sufficient detail, particularly because it's also the Maputo requirement for the countries, for those of us that come from countries where we've ratified Maputo. With the UPR, it works because it's very bare bones, and a lot of the times you then have this engagement with diplomats and other entities, such as they make recommendations, and so you have those, you know, one-on-ones, or you do fact sheets or other things. So it's not left to the report. But in a mechanism like the African Commission, where often that's it, you send the report and they're using that to assess, I would not put a strict page limit, or if I did, I guess I'd put 30, which is kind of like what the state has. On the other hand, being part of a team that's also worked with the state on this, the limit is like a real issue. Like I know, like in the country I'm in, for example, it substantially delayed the finalization of the report. Just figuring out what to cut, and yet at the same time trying to make sure that you're reporting, sort of for the state at least, reporting in sufficient detail according to the guidelines, because they had issues around not reporting sufficiently on like ESUR and so forth. It's just like, it's been like they're frustrated, and I completely understand their frustration. The second issue of concern for me, with what's been just overarching, I guess, is the idea, if you're from a country that ratified Maputo, the idea that you have to follow Part A, Part B can feel very repetitive, like practically when you're drafting. And I wonder if we want to, I understand that, you know, it's usually done by the state report, and I guess it's easier for them to look at a parallel version in the shadow reports, but at the same time, like, just, you know, again, having also assisted the state drafting of it, it gets repetitive. You know, sometimes you have to give some more context, and you have to meet word limits, and so how we deal with this is interesting. The last bit is, I guess, whether we would want, and I say this again, having done a lot of work also with the UPR, and I think the difference between that mechanism and others is sometimes you suggest and say, you know, these could be recommendations that are made, which might also help the commission. Yes, you're giving loads of detail. They don't have to adopt the language as is. They don't have to, but, you know, just if that's something that in a shadow report you may want to have civil society think about doing. So just recommendations / questions to be asked. I think it would make it sort of easier for the commissioners as well. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't quite get your last point. If you can just repeat that.
Saying one other thing we could add to this is for the shadow reports to have, like, you know, maybe after each section or maybe at the end, just suggested recommendations or questions, because I do think it makes it easier for the commissioners. I know we've done that. It's done a lot for example, the universal periodic review, and part of the reason why you do that is because, you know, you're not dealing with people whose sole mandate is to look at a human rights issue. You're dealing with state entities who then have to come and make recommendations to their peers. And so what you often do is suggest questions and recommendations in addition to the information contained in the reports. And maybe that's something we want to include in these guidelines to CSOs, because I do think it helps the commission also zone in more accurately, I guess, on what the main concern for civil society is around particular issues.
Okay. I think that's actually something that the reporting guidelines emphasize on. If you look at particularly the section that speaks on the content of the report, where it encourages society organizations to come up with suggested questions and recommendations and draft concluding observation and so forth. So we had tried to actually capture that. So I've taken note of your other points as well, because I mean, this has become sort of a group, which maybe we can also throw in back in the report back section. And maybe just a comment that I had on the first point regarding the page limit. I understand what you're saying, and I also understand the frustration in terms of trying to fit everything into a small document, but also maybe this is where we should then be having a discussion as civil society to encourage as much as possible to have collaborative reports, because I'm trying to imagine a situation where if you're aware of this setup at the African Commission, where the secretariat is not very big, and the Commission mostly also relies on the technical support that they receive from the Secretariat. So if you have, say, one state report having 5 or 6 shadow reports that are each 30 pages long, the chances of them actually then being considered and having meaningful impact drastically goes down. So whereas, for example, if you have a collaborative report where organizations can actually come up with maybe a comprehensive report as a group, and instead of having several long reports being submitted, that might actually have more impact, because at the end of the day, the point is to try and influence the engagement between the state and the Commission as much as possible for the protection of human rights. So if you have 5 countries, 5 organizations. Yeah. You can go ahead.
Sorry, can I just chime in? Feedback, for example, I got from Commission before was we don't have enough information about what's happening on the ground. So sometimes actually around particular countries, around certain thematic areas, it's the opposite. They don't get to have enough sort of specific information that could then even inform beyond just sort of even the engagement in the state later on when someone is trying to say maybe this is a broader issue cutting across, right? Just enough information around that. So I do think, like you say, it is a tricky balance. I think encouraging civil society, yes, to work with coalitions is great, but there are issues that are always at the margins. The issues where you may be in a country where mainstream society, for example, is not going to address SOGI issues, right? Or you could be in a country where they just don't think this is. And so it's a very tricky line. And I think we must walk it where, yes, we do encourage that, which for almost every mechanism, I think civil society does take advantage sometimes to have sort of a broader report, but then also encourage the individual reports. And I say this having coordinated civil society like joint reports, but then also seeing why there would need to be additional reports. Because even in a joint report, say you did a joint report of 10 pages on this country's like, you know, sort of human rights situation or ESR situation or health situation, like how much of things like, if you say you're doing health, like palliative care, others will get into that report, you know, issues of like abortion. So it depends, I don't want us to overprescribe. I think it could be that it could be like maybe a section that says good practices, for example, thinking about how to work in synergy with others, making sure that, you know, you're using data in reports, which you already emphasized anyway, which is already emphasized in the state guidelines as well. Will definitely make it easier, because I think if you're using data, you tend to have, like you said, you tend to have like shorter reports. If the data sources are there, it becomes trickier if like the data is never collected by the state, you're the collector of the data, and then you have to like, you know, footnote it. So I do, rather than having it, and I say this from the, again, from the perspective, for example, with the UPR, we've been quite frustrated with sometimes feeling like this is okay, I'll just throw this in, right? It could be, you know, you're encouraged using that kind of language, such that if someone does need to go above, they'll sort of like think that through. From the Secretariat perspective, it could be, and again, I guess maybe this is a clarification you could provide for all of us. Does the Secretariat at some point provide a synthesis report in the way that some other mechanisms do? That would be useful to know, because then you could still have, yes, you have 30 pages, but you may want to have the more, the sort of the issues that you think will have a ripple effect at the upfront of the report. But you also have a table of contents, you also have executive summary, so a lot of it can be around format.
Thank you very much, Alana. So Susan has just been disconnected, unfortunately. And while we wait for her to rejoin, I think we can move towards the reporting back sessions. So I know that each group has nominated someone to report back. So I think perhaps we can hear from group 1 and we'll just go according to chronological order. So
yeah, and I'm here as well, so I can always jump in.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Satang. Okay. Can we please hear from group 1?
Hi everyone. This is Kenny Mwicha from Equality Now, and I was the rapporteur for the first group, and we were tasked with doing the introductions and definitions. And I think like generally the good thing that we thought about the introduction and the definition part was that it captured for us most of the things that we would like to see in the introductions and definitions. Especially kind of just talking about the legal background and the legal basis for kind of like having, like, I'm trying to come up with the words of like, why shadow reports are important for the African human rights system, especially the Maputo Protocol and the African Charter. The big thing for the introduction and definition part was that we were a bit concerned about the use of the term relevant expertise. And there it's kind of like a mix of just, like, what are we saying the definition of expertise is? Under the kind of like, like the guiding, the guidelines. So people thought that, that could be construed to be very exclusionary in terms of just like limiting experts or expertise to people who have like, I don't know, a law degree or like a human rights degree. But then there were also like counter arguments whereby, like it is understood that relevant expertise could but be a wide range of like expertise on a human rights topic, all the way from people who actually are on the front line in a particular community facing a certain human rights issue. So there was just that back and forth, and like some of the suggestions that we came up with was maybe we could say relevant expertise on human rights in Africa, but we found that to be also limiting in a sense, because what do you mean by, human rights in Africa? Does that limit, just organizations that are based on the continent? And also, like there are competing definitions of, what human rights is in Africa. So, like maybe that could actually be viewed as exclusionary, like maybe for certain controversial human rights issues on the continent. And so, yeah, so that's one of the things that we noted, and it's an ongoing discussion. Personally, for me, I would say that we could keep the language, but in our collective efforts as civil society organizations and other entities who are interested in submitting shadow reports to the Commission, we could actually like work to ensure that as many organizations and groupings and even individuals as possible have the opportunity to submit shadow reports if they need to before the African Commission. And this could take place through even training organizations. We could encourage organizations to also kind of participate in other ways, and also offering support to organizations who are interested in, submitting shadow reports. The next thing also is that we in the document, there are a lot of references to the secretary, and for Dr. Nabaneh and I we know immediately that that's the secretary of the commission, but maybe we wanted it to be a bit more clearer, and for us to actually say that, like for that to be like a question of like, secretary to the commission. There were some comments about numbering, which I am, you know, like I know when you're a rapporteur, you have to be impartial, but maybe like they were thinking that, you know, like for every section, for example, like introduction, once we are done with that section, the next section starts from 1. But usually I know that in certain documents, the standardization, especially legal documents, is that you have like a consequential and even iterative you know, lineup of sections, regardless, I mean, lineup of provisions, regardless of what particular section that provision is in. And that helps, especially with standardizing the document and ensuring that everyone understands the document across the board. So those were my, that was my presentation for the deliberations in our group. I know that my colleagues from the group are in the call as well. And so if they have anything to add, I welcome them to, you know, discuss this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I see there's a hand from Brian. Is it on the same matter? Is it on the issues that Group 1 is raised? If so,
yes.
Can you have the floor to speak?
Yes, thank you very much. So first of all, I think there was a little bit of mix-up. So when the screen was showing in our group, we thought that since we're in break room 6, we were handling definitions and introductions. So we had a little bit of deliberation on this, and the issues that the previous speakers just said were the very ones that came in, but how then we resolved was that looking at section 2 in the introduction that cites rule 74.2 of the rules of procedure of the African Commission, you will notice that in its listing, it says institutions, organizations, or any interested party wishing to contribute to the examination of the state report. Now, it's at this point then that we realize that from the rules, it was very, it included, it did not exclude. But then at the point of drafting, then I figure is when we have the introduction of a person, individuals with relevant expertise. So we were of the view that the spirit of the rules is maintained even in these guidelines to totally expunge the wording of relevant expertise, because then even a person with expertise would clearly fall under any interested party or individual as it is in the rules. So to resolve that, we thought that would be the solution. So yeah, just that is what I had to
add. Thank you, Brian. I think it actually would allay the. I think the secretary is also noted, and I think Group 1 resolved for itself the issue of the numbering. So I'm going to give back to Susan to chair, but I think we can move to Group 2.
Hi, good afternoon, Susan. This is First Hamiwa from Human Rights Commission, Zambia. I was rapporteuring on under Group 2. And apart from, we agreed with what is provided as aims and purposes in the draft document, but we felt that we could also include the issue of shadow reports being a platform for raising awareness and also encouraging participation of different stakeholders in the human rights review process. Secondly, we also suggested that probably we could include the aim and purpose of the shadow report being, being able to provide additional information, which may be a basis for action by different actors, such as special rapporteurs. thirdly, this was just something that came through discussion, that shadow reports can also be a basis for further engagement and dialogue between the state and civil society, because we believe that the aim of these reports and the information in these reports should not just end up being submitted to the Commission, but they are part of the ongoing dialogue between different stakeholders. That is between the state and civil society organizations or national human rights institutions, including the committee itself with the institution that is submitting the shadow report. I think I will end it there. Those were some of the suggestions, unless my group has any additions to make.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone from the group who has anything else that they want to add to that? Okay, I don't see anyone who wants to add more information, but yes, your contributions on the aims, particularly the issue of increased dialogue between the civil society and states, has been noted. If there are no other contributions from that group, we can move on to group 3.
Oh, hello. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Right. My name is Nyima Keta. I am I work with the International Communities Organization here in London. But basically I'm here on my own just to learn, because I've never done shadow reporting and all that. And unlucky for us, it's like I think all the members of our group are also on their own, for their own selves rather, just to learn and to develop. So what happened was, when we went through the general guidance, the general guidance for preparation of the report, we agreed pretty much on everything, except that we had issues with the official languages, which was not clear at first, but we saw it in the reference section, I think. Yeah. So if we suggested that should clearly come out, so people know, but because we were like, okay, which ones are the official languages? And just to say that not many of us know exactly the official languages of the African Union. So if it can be clearly spelled out in there, that should be, well, that should be good. And I think
Can I just ask a follow-up?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can I just ask a follow-up
question?
Yeah, so the official languages were stated in the footnote.
Yeah.
So do you want us to put it, are you recommending
Yes,
that we
I think,
yes,
I think that's what we agreed on, that it should be included in the text so people know exactly, so it's straightforward and clearer. Because at first we didn't get to see it, so it was later when we found it. It was in the footnote. Yes, and I think we didn't get to go to the
How are you? Where are you coming from? Yeah, where are you coming from?
Hello?
Are you still there?
Yeah,
Yes,
okay, yeah, there was a background noise on there, so yeah, so I think that was the main observation there. We are pretty much happy with everything in there. If I'm correct, just let me know. With the formatting also, I think we agreed on everything. So basically, yeah, that was the main observation. And also the previous speaker did mention about the targeting of specific CSO. That is this the specific stakeholders in this. Like I said, all of us in the group are pretty much there for our own selves. So we didn't get to know much about shadow reporting and stuff. So it will be important to invite specific stakeholders that have been participating in shadow reporting, so they know, or they can highlight specific issues that they want to add into the guidelines. Yeah, I think.
I just wanted maybe to just get clarification on your last point. Are you saying for the purpose of the consultations for the shadow reporting guidelines that they should include specific stakeholders? I'm not sure I understood what you were saying.
Okay, like I give an example. For us in the group, none of us have taken part in shadow reportings before. So what we say, well, maybe there are other organizations that already engage or that are engaged in doing shadow reporting. So what we don't know what the procedure was in targeting the specific audience for this consultation. What was the mode of inviting? Like, did it target specific organizations or CSOs that engage in shadow reporting per se? So you can have a general, like a balance of all the stakeholders involved.
Okay.
Or was it just general? Was it just open? I know, of course, we have different backgrounds from academia and CSOs, but did it actually target specific CSOs that are engaged in shadow reporting? That was a concern that we raised because none of us has an experience in doing shadow reporting.
Okay, maybe before I respond to that, I see there is a hand up from Patricia. I don't know if you want to comment on this specific point. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm figuring out how my way around Zoom. And I'm hoping I'm clear because some in the group were not hearing me properly. I just wanted to add to Nima's contribution, and thank you, Nima, for presenting on our behalf. I think one of the recommendations that we wanted to highlight was that there is a need for a deliberate emphasis in terms of clarity in how some of the guidance is framed. For example, 11 was one of the points of discussion in the group where we said, or we were of the view that when you read it, shadow reports should be accompanied by copies of relevant provisions of the principal, legislative, judicial, administrative, and other texts referred to in the report where applicable. What was of concern for us was that in the beginning, when you did your poll, you realized that 73% of the participants have not participated or drafted a shadow report. And I think in these guidelines, what it becomes an opportunity for the Commission to increase awareness on the part of the potential civil society participants or individuals or whoever the relevant experts that we cited in the above sections, that we should not take it for granted that people reading this document already know that what these processes require for them to be drafting this report. Some civil society organizations will find it very difficult to understand exactly what is being said or what is the intention behind some of what is written there. So we had to ask ourselves and to try and figure out, okay, so what is meant here? And so we then put ourselves in the shoes of the civil society participants or individuals who wish to engage in the state reporting, shadow reporting process. And we realized that if it's not clear for us in this group, and we in the group are persons with interest and either reading or from various entry points in reading this draft document, that we find that if the idea is to also maybe capture those civil society organizations to participate more in the shadow reporting, we need to be a little bit more deliberate in our language to make sure that it is as simple and as clear as possible. We had what was her name? One of the presenters who was in the group with us, she had to explain, I think even when we were discussing 13C and 13D, she then had to come in and explain what that is. So if that explanation is, if the drafting itself is not clear for the reader, then the target of these guidelines, we should also maybe take into account that they might not be of the very sophisticated level that we want them to be. And again, this speaks to the previous speaker, I think is in group 1, who was now questioning or maybe probing us to reflect on the level of this expertise that we are hoping these groups are at in terms of engaging in this shadow reporting process. I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
And
Patricia.
also, just to okay, it's just a question. In how many other languages is this document going to be written?
Can I
Is
jump
it
in?
in English? Because hello.
Yes, Nima, we
Right.
I think
Okay.
yeah. So currently with the with the draft, and patients can correct me, we have the English version that we've been working on. We also have a French version, but the African Commission, when it adopts guidelines and general comments and so forth, it there are also translations into other languages as well. So
Right,
there is
okay.
possibility for that. I just wanted to quickly comment before you go to the next group in terms of the technical language in the group. I was the one that just joined the group with regard to the explanation of what concluding observations are and so forth. I think there are two things to this. So one is in terms of thinking, okay, there are specific technical terms like general comments, general guidelines, and so forth that we use in terms of things that civil society organizations or individuals or national human rights institutions can take into account when they're doing the shadow report. That's one thing. It's a language that's used that, but probably in terms of we also need to, and that might come, I guess, maybe in the general discussion in terms of how we make the document more accessible to people that might not have the requisite knowledge about these processes, but also in terms of that also points to the need for such trainings in terms of developing the capacity of not just civil society organization but individuals that might be interested and so forth. And I think that's why even with our other meetings as well, there have been discussions in terms of strategies of okay, if we have this brief general guideline, shadow reporting guidelines that uses some technical language and so forth, how do we make it more accessible to people? And that was where my frequently asked questions suggestion came in, or a fact sheet or a toolkit or something that civil society organizations or other organizations that are part of this process can actually use in order to, make it easier for even people that don't have such experience in terms of shadow reporting. But I think the bottom line, and we agree, the bottom line is we want to make this guideline as simplified as possible, that ensures that anybody can sort of pick it up and use it in terms of submitting a shadow report.
Okay.
Thank you for that response, Satang. And there's a suggestion also in the comments that maybe some of these technical terms can also be put in the definition section in order to clarify them. If there's nothing else coming out of this group, maybe we can move on to the group.
Yeah, that's all.
There is something. There is something from my side.
Okay.
Wonga Tabata. For me, I would like maybe to differ a bit with my colleagues in that group 3, because not all of us are totally new, but just to have a positive contribution here. I support the idea of maybe having a glossary of terms. For example, if a person is new, will not understand concluding observations. What is concluding observations? But for me, that section is clearly stated, and I'm linking it with the first introductory remarks that a shadow report is not meant to be adversarial at times. So we must also understand the role of shadow reports, what it is. Because at times I get a sense that people think that if it is a shadow report, It has nothing to do with, for example, a state report. But at the end of the day, these two can work together in enhancing the quality of the report and the deepening of a human rights culture at the end of the day. I must say that I'm not comfortable with the idea that we do not understand, we do not have a background, because all these participants, where there was a breakdown of the participants, and it was clearly explained that we come from diverse backgrounds and we're here to learn, but it should not be now the fault of the organizers of this webinar. Well, one could just say at the end of the day, this was an eye-opening session, and it gives practical suggestions on how to strengthen the reporting mechanisms. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And I unfortunately have to alert you to the fact that we are running behind time, and we will need to conclude the meeting. Unfortunately, this technology that we are using, sometimes the platform we are using also needs to be used for other things. So can I ask now that we try and focus on the feedback from the group for now, and try and get in all the groups to give their feedback as quickly as possible. And then if we still have time after the groups, then we can see if we can have other discussions. So for now, can I ask the next group, please, to briefly give us their feedback? Group 4, is there anyone from group 4? Is group 4 the one that was disbanded? Maybe.
I'm sorry.
Group 5?
Group 5. Is this for group 5?
What's the topic?
Hello? Were you in group 5?
Hello? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
So can I call you back? I mean, I was in the middle of the webinar. I need to just make a presentation.
Okay. I take it there's no group 4, but someone from group 5 is going to present.
Could you mention the topic so that we know which group it is?
So this is Isabel from group 5. So
okay.
Can we present, or should we wait for group 4?
You can go ahead, Isabel. We can come back to group 4 if they have a report. Please go ahead.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much. So I'm gonna call you back. Okay. So in group 5, we were responsible for looking at, I think from page 6, we were looking at contents. So so I think the first question, or the first issue which was raised, pertained to independence of to the independence of civil society organizations, especially the fact that they, in some African countries, they are registered by the state, and so when you're engaging during the state reporting process, and you're overly critical, does that not affect your standing and your possible continued existence? But I think someone from the group came in and said that there were measures that guard against that. And then in terms of the substantive content to the contents, we took issue with 17, bullet point 17, D, where so there's no clarity, there's a lack of clarity in terms of, so if you talk about people who have never engaged in a shadow reporting process, if they read this question, they sort of have no idea what exactly is being asked of them. So if you compare 17D and 19E, for instance, E is very clear in terms of the sort of information that is being requested of the drafters of the shadow report. And so our suggestion was that 17D needs to be reworded. We need to reword the provision in order to provide clarity in terms of the exact information or the exact data that is required by the drafters of the shadow report. And then the other comment that was made in the end by one of our colleagues pertains to, I think on page 8, on the practical suggestions. So one of the things there is that, people are encouraged to stick to the format. So if you do not stick to the format, one question was, what are the implications of failing to comply with the suggestions? So the colleague who suggested this was saying that maybe it would be advisable to put in something there about the possible consequences if you do not adhere to the strict guidelines in terms of the format for the submissions, for the shadow report, sorry. So we had not finalized on exactly what we want, but that's essentially what she said before the session got cut off. So those were the two main things that came from our group: rewording 17D to provide clarity, and possibly rethinking adding implications for failing to comply with suggestions in terms of format and provision, paragraph 6 on page 8 on practical suggestions. My colleagues can add if I've left anything out from our group discussions, but from where I stand, that's what I remember us discussing.
Okay. Can I also ask that, thank you very much for that. Can I also ask that if there are additional comments from the group members, you can also put them on the chat so that we capture them from there in the interest of time. But I don't know if Satang or Patience, you have any immediate responses to that, or if we should move along, particularly on the issue of the consequences for formatting.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. I was part of Group 5, and we had started a discussion around the difficulties of even imposing such a restriction or a consequence, because if the Commission is in need of the information, regardless of whether you've used the font that they want, they would want to access the information. So I think it would be very difficult to enforce. And so I think I am more inclined not to put a consequence. And I think it would also really be shooting ourselves in the foot as civil society organizations if we then put consequences that result in the recommendations that we want the Commission to bring out, not reaching the state part.
Okay, so moving on along, the next group. So Group 4 was looking at the content part A, if there was, because I think someone was asking what the topic was, but I don't know if Group 4 still existed, because I think there was a group that was disbanded and incorporated into the other groups. So is there such a group as Group 4? Should we move along to Group 6 then? Okay, so Group 6, please go ahead and do your presentation. Group 6 was looking at the same as the Group 1. It was looking at the introduction.
Yes, from group 6, if you remember, I actually made an intervention when the first person was speaking. I thought it was a mix-up. So it was group 1 and 6 that were doing introduction and definitions, and we already gave our thoughts on that.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so group 7 was looking also at the content part A. Do you have any additional comments that have not been?
I think just 2 that have not been mentioned. The first was on the language, that it should be a singular format as opposed to a plural format to be used. So development instead of development, something like that, because using a plural format means a person has to use more than one example. So if you give an example of something, there have to be at least 2. There was also an issue with the term practical measures, and that the use of the term practical would suggest that states can just do the bare minimum, and it was suggested that maybe you'd rather use the term progressive measures as opposed to practical. And on the word developments, there was also a suggestion that it be replaced with progress, because if you use the word developments in the international development context, international human rights context, development can mean something else. So you would rather refer to it as what progress has been made with particular rights as opposed to what developments. And there were just general observations that the guidelines provide a standard format for the reports, and that's good. And it was noted that there's no suggestion of a particular font, but I think there was a response in the last group that, maybe it's a bit pedantic to focus too much on the nitty-gritties. So that's from group 7. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. If there are any additional comments from the group, they can also be captured in the comments. I think we are left with only one group, group 8. If you have any additional comments that have not been mentioned, group 8 was looking at the content part B. If you have anything else that has not already been mentioned, group 8, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Patrick Wadula from South Africa. Sorry, my voice. The only things that we looked at there on part B, point 20B, which talks about legislative and administrative measures. Now, that sentence is very long, a bit convolutive, and we suggest that that sentence be probably split into 2, because it tends to lose probably someone as to what is being explained there. In relation to, are you talking about in the country where the shadow report is being produced from, or are you talking about the Maputo Protocol? That sentence has to be very clear, and thereby we suggested that it should be split into 2. That is 20B. And then on the next page, page 8, we also, in fact, suggested that B and C should actually be in 1, because they more or less are intertwined, and somehow would need to bring the 2 of them and maybe have a sub, maybe BA or B1 and B2 or something like that. But C is as well quite long, and it speaks to probably some elements of B. D is fine. We agreed with D, which is quite clear and coincides. And also E, which is the last one, we were happy with that one as well. Just like everybody has mentioned in passing now, is that the issue of language, which has been mentioned by everybody, that was also a concern for our group. And that if it is simplified, as others have suggested, and you've taken that recommendation, it would be good. And also that I'm not quite sure whether somewhere in the Maputo Protocol or the Africa Charter, whether there are any measure, I mean, what do you call it? Punitive measures on countries in terms of the ones that actually don't report correctly in terms of the state report, and also who actually do not do what they should be doing. I'm not quite sure whether they do specify some sort of penalties in there, suspension or anything like that, but probably some of those things have to be considered. Those were the issues we discussed in our group. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just maybe clarification on the last point. So the punitive measures, are you saying that those are the issues that should also be incorporated in the guidelines? I didn't quite understand your point.
In this instance, I think it should be in the I think it's referred to as the state policy. What was it called again? State party reporting guidelines.
Oh yes. Mm.
I think it should be in there, not in the shadow, because I think we were speaking from the perspective that, you know, the state parties do not comply, and if they don't, you know, what should be done about it? There has to be some stick or something to push them to actually do something about it.
Okay, so referring to the earlier conversation about consequences, you are suggesting that they should actually be in the state reporting guidelines, and okay, I think I understand now. Okay, so we have had all the feedback from the reports. We are coming to the end of the meeting, but I also maybe want to just give this opportunity if there's a further discussion that needs to be, any burning points that also need to be discussed regarding the guidelines. Geoffrey, are you still there?
Hi, Susan.
Hi. Do you want maybe to just take this this conversation just briefly, just having the final discussion points, and then maybe we can conclude the meeting?
Yes, thank you, Susan. Thank you to all the participants who've taken their time to be here with us today. My name is Geoffrey Ochieng. I work with ICJ Kenya as a legal researcher. I am glad to be part of these great deliberations on shadow reporting guidelines to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. And I hope we've had very fruitful discussions in our respective breakout rooms. I am delighted with the diversity that the participants present, and everyone took their time to be part of these very important discussions. Even as we reflect on the various issues and insightful points that have been deliberated by the various groups, I believe there is a general consensus that the guidelines present an exceptional opportunity to hold states to account and to also improve collaborations within civil society organizations in shadow reporting to ensure that the provisions that have been put in place in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the Maputo Protocol are actually realized. From the deliberations, I could get a sense that there is a need to sort of have provisions that encourage increased dialogue between the various state and non-state actors. The work should be more complementary. And then there is a hope that even as we do the reporting, states will actually fulfill their obligations under the African Charter and the Maputo Protocol. There is also a general feeling on the language that it needs to be simplified, and also they need to maybe translate them into various versions to bring more clarity. Clarity in terms of framing the guidelines, which will also enhance awareness creation and capacity building for stakeholders who are interested in engaging in the shadow reporting process. Again, and this point was clarified that the drafts are in English and in French, but once they have been adopted by the Commission, then they can be translated into the other official languages recognized by the Commission. One person suggested they need to include a glossary of terms to enhance understanding and to make some of the terms even clearer for those people who are in the shadow reporting process before. And there is also a question on the independence of civil society organization and how it may affect their work in terms of reporting. And there is a general feeling that the document presents good provisions, but then there needs to be clarity in terms of breaking down some of the clauses into smaller units that can be comprehended faster by, of course, those who have not interacted with the process before. So the deliberations have been quite informative and insightful. There is then the general feeling that where clauses are too compounded, then they should be shortened to make it a simplified document. So, Susan, I think that's it from me. I am happy to be part of these deliberations. I have learned quite a lot, and I am grateful for the opportunity. Back to you, Susan.
Thank you very much. And I think that has nicely summarized for us what has taken place today. And I think one of the issues that that has constantly come up from the comments that we were receiving throughout, and also referring to just to the latest comment that I see on the chat, is the finalization of these guidelines. And I think this process today as a way of looking at and exploring what civil society organizations think basically about the draft as it stands now is continues to be part of a process. I think from what I can gather also even from the participants is that they, as much as generally people seem to be happy with the direction that it is going, there have been some suggestions that maybe there is need for further consultations. I think this is an ongoing process. I will hand over to Patience, who's just going to just briefly speak to the way forward after this, but this has been a very fruitful and important discussion to have as it is shaping the guidelines in the direction that I think will work for us. Patience, do you want to just speak on the way forward, and then we conclude the meeting?
Thank you very much, Susan, and thank you, Geoffrey, for the summary of what we discussed today. I also just want to thank the participants really for the very insightful contributions that came out from the group work. And I must agree with Susan that the sense that I'm also getting from the feedback is that generally people are happy with the contents of the guidelines, but there is a feeling that we need to attend to more the wording of the guidelines, to simplify it a little bit more, to make it user-friendly for the constituents that we are targeting. So I think we have well noted that, and I also think that it points out to the need for further engagement with civil society organizations, even as we go about to simplify it even further. I also want to point out that beyond this meeting, there was also the sharing of the document online. And so we are also expecting to receive feedback from people who were not able to attend the webinar, but who took time to read it and give their comments online. We also feel, I think that post this meeting, maybe we need to open it up to more contributions online, so that even people who were in this meeting who feel that there are other things that come out as they continue to think about the guidelines, they can still contribute to the guidelines. But in terms of the agreed way forward, I think immediate to this process is the consolidation of the comments that have been given and an improved version of the draft, which we then intend to share with the Commission. The Commission itself will also deliberate on the document and give their comments, and this will entail now a process of reworking the document based on the suggestions of the Commission itself, and it might also entail taking it back to experts who will refine the draft itself. Once the draft has been agreed upon by the Commission, then the Commission is expected to adopt the document, and then it becomes a document that that we can now use as the guidelines to shadow reporting. So for us as CSOs, I think we still need to contribute to the document to refine it, and then a submission to the Commission, and then revise it based on the input of the Commission before its adoption. I see that there has been questions around timelines. We cannot give timelines for the adoption of the document because that really depends also to a large extent on how the Commission views the draft. If they feel that there's a lot of work that still needs to happen on the draft, then it will take much more time than we hope before the guidelines are eventually adopted. And then of course, the Commission doesn't sit frequently. It sits 4 times in a year, 2 extraordinary sessions and 2 ordinary sessions. So it is only at these sittings that they deliberate on things such as these guidelines. So if they give us comments post one session, we have to then submit the draft for the next session, and depending on what is on their program, the draft might not actually be looked at in the next session and so forth. So we can't give exact time frames of when the draft document is going to be finalized. It will be largely dependent on how the Commission views the document. But I think that is the way forward that I can speak to at the moment.
Thank you very much. I think we have done what we came here to do. I would just ask in terms one of our partners from ICJ Kenya, LC Saina, to just give us the concluding remarks, and then we can close the meeting.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much. And good afternoon, colleagues and friends and partners of ICJ Kenya. I really appreciate this time that we've had together. You're right, Susan. I've been listening in right from the beginning and seeing how much everybody's actively participating and contributing their views and comments to the enriching the document. So on behalf of the ICJ Kenya Council and the team that work behind the scenes, our partner Equality Now and the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria, I really thank you all for taking the time. It's been worth our time this morning to validate this document. I'm glad to see Patience and Satang during our first initial discussions of getting together to have a joint concerted efforts in putting together this process of developing and ensuring that we come up with the guidelines on behalf of civil society. And I'm glad that the engagement with the academia and the mix between civil society has really come to this far, including the resolution from the African Commission on passing it to ensure that we begin to eventually adopt the use of the guidelines. So from our end, as partners, as ICJ, we see this resolution that it clearly depicts that our commitment and involvement in developing, fulfillment of human rights protection in the continent is part of our broader goal to ensure that the people of Africa really enjoy the rights that are enjoyed in the African Charter and the Maputo Protocol. So I commend the civil society for the commitment. And as I close today's validation meeting, both on behalf of the ICJ, Equality Now, and the Center, I hope that this process has encouraged our civil society partners who participated today. It has reignited their passion, and hopefully they will continue to actively participate in the various human rights treaty body mechanisms. So towards this end, I'm hoping that we continue to advocate the promotion of the human rights in Africa. So thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you so much, participants. Thank you, Susan, for being a great moderator. We really enjoyed your moderation, as well as your colleagues at the center. Thank you to Satang, thank you to Patience, and importantly, thank you to Judy also for representing the Equality Now. So I wish everybody a great afternoon, and on behalf of the ICJ Kenya team, I say thank you. All the best.
Thank you very much. I wish you a great afternoon, and thank you for coming to this meeting. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.